Hey everybody, Joseph here coming to you live. Hope you guys are doing great. Hi, Wyoming. Hope you guys are doing well. It's really great to be here with all of you today. And this evening, I am talking about taxes, DOGE, government efficiency, just kind of all of these things. You know what? Most of us are aware of what's going on in our federal government with DOGE. Most of us are aware of just sort of the burden that the American people bear, but not just the American people, also the folks in Wyoming. Interesting fact, you guys, from a tax standpoint, the state of Wyoming, we've got it pretty good. Our tax burden in the state of Wyoming is really relatively low when you compare it to the rest of the nation. And so we are blessed in this area. And yet I know that many of us are asking the question, what about taxes? What's good? What's not? Where's the balance? So as most of you know, my campaign for governor, I'm running on four key principles: faith, family, freedom, and the future. So I want to just touch real quick on that as it pertains to taxes. So my faith informs me, Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God. Jesus had to pay the temple tax, and so they went fishing, and I want to say that it was Peter, I think, that reeled in the fish, and they opened the fish, and they paid their taxes. And so it is important for all of us that we do pay taxes. But I guess the real question is how much is too much? Are we rendering to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and then some? Where is that balance? Where is that line? And I think that God would have us to pay taxes, but that we also need to make sure our government is being responsible, right, you guys? How do taxes affect families? Well, I'm just going to talk from my personal standpoint and share with you. Gosh, my property taxes, they've gone up $300 or $400 a month. My mortgage has gone up $300 or $400 a month in the last several years. That is a lot of food off my family's table. I mean, we kind of argue about property taxes in the sense that people on fixed incomes, right? The elderly, the retired, things like that. But you guys, every family, I mean, my family lives on a fixed income, and that's me going to work, getting paid for that work. Even though I'm a business owner, I get paid a salary, and that's what we live on. And when taxes are overburdensome, it affects our families. Whether that's taxes that we pay at the store, or property taxes. And of course, we're blessed in Wyoming. We don't pay income taxes in the state of Wyoming, but we still this burden of tax on us. So where is that balance for our families? And then when it comes to freedom, you think about so many of our different taxes and how these taxes actually work against our freedoms. We pay taxes so that then we could be regulated, right? So we're paying people to keep an eye on us, right? With our taxes. And so when it comes to our freedoms, the third pillar of my campaign, it's so important that we look at how our taxes enabling and encouraging our freedoms, or is it not? And that's really, really important. By the way, I noticed my background's a little bit better today. I'm trying some different lighting things to get my background to work good. So thanks for bearing with me on that. Now I digress. I get distracted. I'm going to go back to the fourth pillar of my campaign, which is the future when it comes to taxes. There's no end in sight. I have a good friend who lives in Europe, and he says he figures 80% of all of his money he makes gets put into some kind of tax or some kind of thing. And he's really beginning to ask. In fact, he's going to be here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to do some interviews together, and we're going to share. He's going to talk to me about Europe and kind of the condition and how he sees America going that way. And we're going to have some really great conversations about that. But thinking about the future, there's no end in sight when it comes to taxes, you guys. We have to do something about this. And so with that, I've talked a little bit about the four pillars of my campaign and taxes. I want to delve into some details. I'm going to start with Wyoming tax issues, and then I want to go into national tax issues, because I'll be honest, yes, we have tax issues here in Wyoming, but the bigger issues when it comes to tax, obviously, is the burden that our federal government is putting on. And that's real, we'll talk about DOGE and government efficiency a little bit and things like that in a little while as well. So with that, let's talk about Wyoming and taxes. Like I said, guys, we're doing really good when you look at the nation. We complain about what taxes we have, but when you look at the nation, our taxes are relatively low. Does that mean that there's not room for improvement? Absolutely not. And so I'm going to start with the hot topic around the water cooler. Seems like for years, right? For years and years, and no more this last legislative session where we came up with this pile of exemptions and a 25% discount and all this meddling and tweaking with no actual property tax solution. And I have a great amount of respect for the wonderful men and women in our legislature, and the hard work that they do. But guys, we didn't get a solution. And it's really, really, really important that we get a solution with property taxes. I have that solution. It's not necessarily my root idea or anything, you guys, but our goal needs to be to eliminate property taxes. My opinion on property rights, values, and taxes is this. You should own the dirt on your land. You should own everything under the dirt on your land. You pay taxes on that. You should own everything under that dirt. You should own everything that you've put on top of that dirt. And the only time you hear from the government is if you're being a really naughty neighbor, okay? You're not being a good neighbor, then yeah, government's job is to protect the populace, right? The community, to make sure it's safe and healthy, all that good stuff. So if you're being a really bad neighbor and you get a nuisance call, then maybe someone comes and says hi to you. The only other situation is that, hey, maybe you've decided you're going to build a little nuclear reactor on your 9 acres. Well, then you probably should have the government get involved in that, have our great agencies get involved in that. But other than that, your property should be your property. And at some point, you should never have to pay taxes on that property ever again because it's yours. And that you could pass that to your family without them being penalized for getting that property. So my plan for property taxes, Wyoming, first we start with this. We've got all these issues, right, that we've talked about with property taxes. People are getting priced out of their homes, the elderly, the fixed income, the Social Security folks. All these people can't afford their taxes anymore. Why? Well, let's get to the root of the problem. Let's ask ourselves, why is that happening? The reason that's happening is because we keep reassessing their property. And whether you believe it or not, because there's a lot of folks in government that say it's not an unrealized tax. It is. It is an unrealized tax when you say, I am going to tax you based on a perceived value of something that you own, but you have not received the benefit. That money is not in your bank. That is an unrealized tax. So the root of this problem is all these people struggling with their property taxes. The root of this problem is we tax people based on just whatever the value is today. We don't tax them based on just what they paid for it. You know what? Here's what we have to do. Step one on property taxes is this. You tax people based on what they paid for their property. So if they paid $150,000 for their property 20 years ago, that's what they pay taxes on. If I buy a house yesterday for $1 million, that's what I pay taxes on. That's fair, it's equitable, and it changes with the times. And you might say, well, Joseph, what about revenue? Well, if you look at actual revenue and property taxes in the state of Wyoming, yes, we have a few depressed counties that if property taxes went away completely, it would really, really have a negative impact. But on a lot of our counties, you're going to take 10, maybe 15% out of their budget. But guess what? We can find ways in Wyoming to get creative with energy, tourism, rare earth minerals, all of this that we can find in Wyoming and go ahead and get, different ways to get revenue. But first step is we got to just tax people on what they pay for their property. That eliminates almost all of the concerns and problems that we have now and today. Now, it's been said among government officials, well, you just can't do that. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the way to do that. We don't have the manpower to do it, whatever. You know what? We need to figure it out. We just need to do it. We need to stop just playing around with the thing and fix it once and for all and invest in fixing it. So that's property taxes. And then eventually our goal should be to eliminate property taxes entirely. And there's a lot of ways we could look at that. Maybe like, okay, you've paid for 20 years, property tax is gone. There's a lot of scenarios you could talk about when it's like, how do we then eliminate property taxes for people, which we should eventually. I mean, that's the American dream. is to do that. So that's property taxes. And the reason why I want to talk about that so much is because it's such a hot topic here in Wyoming. Well, and across the nation, really, right? States are looking at how to eliminate property taxes. Now, let's talk just a minute about income taxes. You know, we're so blessed in Wyoming, we have no state income tax. So count your blessings, you guys. I come from a place where, now my wife's family, native here to Wyoming, we came here with her family to relocate. I have put my roots down here. I'm raising my kids here. And that's why I'm running for governor, because I want to protect this future for my kids and for the people of Wyoming. You know, when we think about income tax, you know, we don't have any here in Wyoming, but we do on the federal level. And I'll talk about that in a little while. So thank God for that. Sales tax. Again, I think sales tax is a great consumption. I think I like consumption-based taxes, and here's why. Blah, blah, blah. I can't talk here for a minute. Consumption-based taxes. It allows us to save what we want, spend what we want. It creates revenue for our cities, counties, and state, and it's consumption-based. And so it allows us to have a way to create and generate revenue while keeping it at a reasonable level. You know, now we don't want to see sales tax get way up, right? We don't want to be paying 10% on sales tax, right? We don't want to be doing stuff like that. So I think it's careful and monitoring sales tax. But you know, there's so many different ways that we could create revenue in the state. You know, additional things with tourism, you know, our rare earth minerals and so on, like I said earlier. So that's sales tax. Now, obviously, we have various regulatory taxes that we all pay a little bit here and there, you know, on our cell phone bills, on our energy bills. You know, there's different small taxes there, things like that. I think we need to just remember that that's a reasonable approach. Even, you know, our car registration, it's a reasonable approach to maintaining our state. So we have to have some of that, but we can certainly keep an eye on all of it and make sure that it's fair and equitable for our families, for our freedoms, and for our futures. So now I want to kind of get into more of what's going on the national scale, but also with DOGE and government efficiency, which I'll talk a little bit about here in Wyoming as well, but also national taxes. So you guys, I think this is one of the things that I want to stand in the gap for the people of Wyoming when it comes to taxes on the federal level. You know, this idea of, you know, there's two things sure in life, right? Death and taxes. But now we even tax people in their death. You know, here I've worked hard my whole life, and I want to give something to my children and to their children. The Bible says to save the inheritance for your children's children. And so I want to do that. And in my passing, the government, in so many cases, feels entitled to 50% or more of that in death. How wrong is that? That you have a grieving family. My kids and my wife are grieving because I'm no longer here. And the government says, well, we want to take 50% of that away from you as well, or more or less, you know, around that, right? They're going to take that from them. After I've already spent a life paying taxes on all that. I spent my life paying taxes on that, and then the government thinks that they own that. So I want to stand in the gap. I will stand in the gap with the federal government when it comes to death taxes. I want to look really hard at capital gains taxes. I think some of this stuff is just, it should be just not even legal. You know, here I am, I've invested, I've taken a risk. And, you know, most of us, we live, right? We work to live, we live to work. Like, we work and we provide for our families. And, you know, a lot of us don't have massive fat bank accounts, right? And yet there's this idea that even for you and me, you know, I guess the regular folks, right? That if I take a risk, you know, maybe I put $5,000 into a risk. I'm gonna maybe a stock or, you know, a stock or cryptocurrency or something like this, and I hit it big. I just like, wow, like, you know, you get a great reward from that investment, and then you go to take that investment and spread that wealth and that stuff around your family, and the government wants to take half of that too on capital gains or whatever. You know, there has to be reasonable limitations put on this, because all it's doing is pressing us down further and further. And yeah, that gap for the wealthy and the middle class is just going in the opposite direction, right, you guys? Because they just keep taking so much of what little we're trying to build and create for our families, right? And it's just so wrong. So I want to address, the income taxes, the pleasure of employing people, payroll taxes, all this kind of stuff that we have to pay in taxes at the federal level, that is such a burden to the people of Wyoming. So I want to fight for the people of Wyoming, not just in Wyoming, but on the federal level as well. That's just really, really important to me. So that's in a nutshell on the federal level in Wyoming and our tax situation, some of the ideas I have. I want to talk about DOGE. It seems like we've got some folks in the legislature right now that are super stoked on getting some kind of DOGE going in Wyoming. But it sounds like there's also a lot of pushback. I was listening to the Speaker of the House just the other day. He was doing a wonderful interview with our friends from the Wyoming Family Alliance. And he mentioned how our finances in Wyoming, and we have like 600 plus buckets of money sitting around for different things. And the system has been created so that it is so complicated that it's difficult to unpack and manage, and that's been done by design. So first of all, I know DOGE is a buzzword, right? But what I really want to say is, like, we need to line by line the state. We need to line, but not just the state, our counties and our cities need to do this too. Because I would also argue that even in this tax conversation, or in this burdensome bureaucracy conversation, that our counties and cities are putting a lot of burden on the people. And we've kind of let them do that, and it's gotten out of our control. So we do need to go line by line. And I think we've got some great treasurers across the state, some great, folks, that work in our counties and cities, but their hands are tied by rules, right? Rules, regs, they got to do this way, this, that way. We need to loosen this stuff all up so that we could be accountable to the public. We can be transparent. And yeah, we shouldn't be creating rules and legislation in search of a problem, right? And I'm going to steal that, just kind of from governing in general. Like, are we creating things that are just in search of a problem when we don't have a problem? But I think having that government transparency is very important. And yeah, you could call it DOGE, but it should just be this way anyways, right? You guys, like we should be able to get that from our government in a way that we can understand. That's part of the problem. Government is constantly telling us folks that, well, it's available on the website. It's available here. Or you can go into the office and get a printout and you do this. And it's become so complex and so convoluted that you and I, just regular people, for lack of a better word, have an extremely difficult time understanding what's going on. And no one in government, there are very few, there's a couple representatives doing a good job explaining what's actually going on to the public, but most of our representatives hide behind their closed doors or whatever, or they're not talking to us about what's going on. And that's the kind of governor I'm going to be. What I'm doing right now, which is talking to you, making a video, is what you would get from me as governor of Wyoming. I will inform you and explain to you, hey, this is why the abortion issue is this way. Well, I'm not talking about that today, but that's coming up too, in the state of Wyoming a lot as well. But how about I explain to you as your governor, hey, Wyoming, this is why the taxes are this way. This is what's going on. This is where we're headed. This is what we're doing. And you get that kind of information directly from me. The buck stops, right, with me as the governor. But if I provide you that information weekly or bi-weekly, update, with what's going on, in your government, that would be so helpful to the people of Wyoming. And that's the kind of governor I want to be. I'm not afraid to get in front of this camera. Now, I prefer to be with people. This is a start. This is where I get going. This is the conversation we have. And I can get this video out across the state as well. So with that, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about efficiency. Stuff has gotten, as you all know, stuff has gotten very pricey in the private sector, but it's also the same for government. Things have gotten more expensive. Fixing the Green River Tunnel is going to be expensive. These things do happen, but how can we do it efficiently and responsibly? We've seen so many different things in our government. I'll talk briefly about education, where spending on education like this is going up. Spending on education is going this way, and results are going down. So there's something wrong there. We need to address that. And I will address the education conversation in a thing, but are we truly being efficient when we're seeing the results going in the other direction? Or do we need to look at that line by line and go, you know what? The teachers love the kids, care about the kids. We've kind of, tied their hands on what they can do and how they can do it. And we've got all this bureaucracy that's on top of them. Maybe we need to look at that from a government efficiency standpoint and do that. And I think a lot of our current leaders and legislators are motivated to do that. But I think where we lack is actual mindful, thought out solutions rather than let's just add another layer to this onion, right? And see what happens, like kind of experiment with it. So instead of band-aids, let's move more towards solutions. And that's the kind of governor that I would be for Wyoming, is a solutions-oriented governor. And that's what my focus is. Don't put it on my desk if this isn't an actual solution. And I know that may sound kind of harsh, kind of strong, but that's what we need to do in order to move Wyoming forward. So with that, I want to just wrap up with just a couple of things. So just being mindful that in Wyoming, we are truly still blessed. Even with the current taxes that we do pay, we are way better off than the nation and especially in the world. I mean, Canadians, Europeans, folks anywhere in the first world countries, well, third world countries, they have a different burden, but the first world countries, we are so blessed, even though things are very, very low. And it may not seem low, but they are. So remember to count your blessings today and to be thankful. And it's not that there's not room for improvement, because there absolutely is. But let's be thankful for what God's given us today. And with that, this is just a brief, I ended up talking for about 22 minutes on taxes, DOGE, and government efficiency for the state of Wyoming, and just kind of where I stand on that. So I know this is just a talking head video, but I hope you'll watch it. I want you to comment on it if you'd like to. Also, feel free to share this video, but I want to interact with you. I want to hear from you, Wyoming, on what do you want to talk about when it comes to taxes. I'm an open book. I'll answer any question that you have to ask me. Feel free to comment this video, share it, do all of that. If you're interested in getting involved in my campaign, look at joseph4wy.com. joseph4wy.com. Also got information on there on all the issues that concern us as Wyoming citizens, as citizens of the United States. I've got a lot of information on there that you can feel free to digest in your leisure. And with that, I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Many blessings to you all. I'm going to go ahead and go over here and press this end recording button. Wish you all well. Take care. Bye now.